Hello folks, and welcome to the Captain Sim 707. Today we're going to be flying from Philadelphia Airport all the way up to my home base in Boston, Massachusetts. Nice short flight. We're going to be flying, as I said, in the Captain Sim Astrojet American Airlines 707. Absolutely beautiful plane. We are also going to fly in the using the CIVA INS. This is going to be an analog GPS type thing. A little difficult in operation, but we'll go through all the steps for both that and this Captain Sim 707. So let's get started. I am going to start by going over to the engineering panel and zoom in here. And I'm going to look up a little bit to the battery. Going to turn that guy on. Also going to turn the selected load in volts, right-click that on over to battery. We're going to start off with ground service. You may notice there is no APU. 707s did not have an APU, so I'm going to hit Shift F2 and include the external power and external air. I'm also going to left-click on ground service, which is going to turn on the external power. Finally, let's take our essential power, kick that over to external power. You can see the pressure goes on up, failure light goes off, both of which are good things. Let's take our residual volts, turn that to external power as well. And I want to make sure nothing blows up, so let's also turn on equipment heating, or sorry, cooling. You probably don't want equipment heating. It does that fine on its own. Now, normally I would continue with all of the other procedures for the engineering panel and everything else here. What I'm really going to focus on now, though, is I'm going to hit Shift 7 and 8. This is because I already installed the CIVA INS. You can download this free from simfly.com. It is highly recommended, an awesome addition. Think of it like a very early version of the FMC. So we're going to start by turning this guy on. Click to the right. We have it. Alright, and we need to start by changing our knobs up here at the top over to position. Also going to hit Shift Z to get our current location. We just have to start by entering where we are. 39523, insert. Note I hit N before there to signify north. Now it's W075 150, yeah, 150. And I am going to insert that. Then how about we do it again? On this right one, I'm going to hit north, 39523, insert, west 075150, and insert. The reason why many planes had one or two or three or a couple of these is the more units you have, the more they could triangulate to have a better idea of where you are. Now you may notice the warning sign comes on. That's fine. Just double-click on Test. Go. And now that is about ready to align. You have to enter that when it's on standby. But now we need to align. There we go. I'm also going to rotate my knobs over to the right where it says it's basically how far to alignment we are. Now alignment is one of the major things about these units. See this number 95? Well, that number doesn't, it's not 95. It looks like it is. It's not really. The right number, 5, is the API, basically how close to alignment we are. So we need to get our 9, which will gradually descend until it gets below 5. Until it goes all the way down to 0. Now, I'm a lazy, impatient person, so I don't want to wait the several minutes that's going to take. See my little screw in the upper right corner of my INS alignment units. I'm going to click that. It says Immediate Alignment. There we go. The screw directly to the right of the right battery sign. You can see the numbers plummeting now. It's easily gone from 9 down to 6. Now, another very important note about this is that I have weather turned off. Unfortunately, one of the really big downsides of this whole alignment process is that if the plane moves at all, you turn on an engine. FSX does this thing where the plane shimmies a little bit. That's going to screw up your alignment. If you have wind, particularly strong wind, I've been prevented from this going below 6 because the plane keeps moving as it gets hit with wind. That's why whenever I do my CIVA INS flights, at least in my alignment process, I turn off my weather. See, we're already below 5.5 into 4.5. What I'm going to do now is take a little bit of time for some of my other prep. I want to make sure that my plane is flyable. So, you know what? I prefer this view. I'm going to look up at emergency flap. Should be set to normal. Great. We're going to go down to brakes. Should be set to anti-skid. Should be set to on. Test, inbound and outbound. Always have difficulty getting that there. Now let's open up our rudder and spoiler. All those should be set to on. Always surprises me on these old steam-powered planes that they don't have a certain logic or CRM, anything about that, about how it's really run. You have on that is up, you have on that is down. I think that all up, like they do in, say, some of the Embraers, would be a better decision, but I'm not a plane designer. For many good reasons. Okay, engine start, we're not ready for. We're not using the Doppler. And lights are okay for now. We're not going to turn on the pitot yet. And, okay, looks like, alright, we need to put on our emergency exit lights. Let's make that armed. And seatbelts are on. Okay. Now, one other thing that I absolutely must, let me get rid of our wheel, absolutely must do at this point. Let me actually zoom in on this guy, because it's going to be a little tricky to find. I want to make sure I change my navigation from Doppler, which is this thing, that, frankly, I have no idea how to use yet, down to INS. Otherwise, that all this INS work we're doing is not going to be worth anything. I'm also going to load up my VOR flight plan. I like to follow along with where I am, so let's change that to 113.8 on nav 1. On the 072 radial, I'm also going to move my heading guide. I'm planning on taking off from runway 09er left because I'm lazy, and hey, I have no traffic, so nothing is going to get away. Okay, next we're going to go to 117.7. Note that we're not actually going to be navigating using these VORs, just a nice guide to make sure that you are, in fact, where you want to be. Also, make sure that your cold and dark setup doesn't have your fuel cutoff switches on top. Control-Shift F1 will bring those down to where we need them to be. And let's see here. I think we are pretty well set for engine start once we are fully aligned, which we are. 0.5 is the highest level of alignment we can be. But one more thing we still need to do. I'm going to click my plus sign on my card reader. I could go through the process of actually typing in the GPS coordinates of all the VORs between PHL and Boston, but I'm way too lazy for that, so I'm not going to. Instead, I use this awesome site that's called feature program, whatever you want to call it, called Plan Converter. You should be able to Google Plan Converter. It's going to convert your FSX flight plans into something readable by the Delco INS, CIVA INS, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to locate the KPHL-KBOS AWC. There are also ADCs, but it's the AWC you're looking for. Click aux start. It pops up with red or read. Anyway. Then let's take a look over at waypoint. That's my first waypoint, second, third, fourth, fifth, and there is no sixth. That's why it's empty. But let's take a look over here, which has my waypoints all at 0. Here's why. See my remote button? Second button from the left for each of these. Going to click on remote. This means that what is read by one will be read by another. So let me again find KPHL-KBOS, hit aux start, click my little wheel. Now everything is properly loaded. So we are all aligned and ready to go. I'm going to change this over to nav for both. I'm also going to turn on INS nav 1 mode. And I think we are good to go. Let's take one quick look over at my engineering panel, and let's take a look at our fuel panel. You can see that for some of these, they are empty. My left aux tank, my center tank, my right aux tank, all totally empty. Well, that's fine. I'm just going to turn off the boost pump for those. But if you find you're doing a short-haul flight, like I'm about to, Boston and Philly are right next to each other, you are probably going to run into problems with starting engines 1 and 4 with this current alignment. What you need to do is each of these cross feeds I'm going to change to be vertical. Right. Now I can make sure that fuel is in fact going to go to engine 1 and 4. Otherwise, when you start them, they're just going to sit there at about 20% N2, and you're going to have a 2-engine flight, which isn't going to be a good thing. Let's take care of a few other issues. I am going to make sure my bleed airs are on. I'm going to need those for starting up my engines. Going to right-click to kill my air compressors. May as well set in an automatic 75-degree temperature for crew and cabin. And I think that's about it for now. Let's start some engines. Now, the way that, and again, I'm no 1960s aircraft pilot, as awesome as that would be, the way that I understand this is going to work is I start with engine 3, then 4, then we actually push back, so we'll have disconnected external power and air. Then we start 1 and 2 using these 2 other engines. So I'm going to move the starter up to low pressure. Engine 3 moves over to ground. And we can see that our N2 is rising. I want to make sure that I will hit my fuel cutoff up to start. Hopefully it should kick in. Oh, beautiful. I love seeing that kick forward. Note that if it makes it much past 20%, it very well may fail. Now, it's not too concerning, but if this does make it right around sitting at the 20% N2 level, it's probably going to not work so well. You're going to have to just start it all over again, just switch it back to ground, and try to hit the fuel again. There we go. Engines 3 and 4 are now stabilized at about 58% N2, I guess. Awesome. So that's a good start. Let's make sure that both of these are set to idle. And I do believe that it is time for us to push back. Turn off my external power and air. Nothing special about my pushback, just going to Shift P. Sorry, Shift Papa. May as well keep this aeronautical. And I'm going to do my very best to swing my nose to the left. Sometimes it works, most of the time it fails. Going to press 2 on my keyboard. Also, probably use this as a good time to turn on my lighting. Beacon, nav, runway turn off. Also a good time to... Window heat is going to be fine for now. We'll turn on the pitot. Click, click. Hey, it's actually turning to the left. Absolutely love the way this plane looks. One of my absolute favorite liveries, and they just did a spectacular job at Captain Sim, really bringing it to life. Alright, I don't want to get too far, nor do I think we're going to keep turning exactly where we need to be, so that's good enough. And now, I think we're ready for the other two. We have our parking brake back on. And let's get started with engine 1. Change that to ground. N2 gauge is going to head on up, and about 18%. Start. Finally, one more, engine 2. Oops, think I may have waited a bit too long. Wouldn't be surprised if this yells at me. Let's see if it's gonna make it. Yeah, that's what happens when you get distracted, and not sure if it's gonna stabilize. Whew, just made it. Alright, so all of my fuel switches are set at full. Let's close this sucker back down, and how about some flaps? That's probably gonna help. Move our flaps. Whoops, think I may have... Whoa, let's try just using... There we go. This is going to go to flap level 14. Okay. Dial in my decision height. Won't need that for a while, but... Bring that up to about 200 feet. Boston's basically at sea level. That should be fine. And let's go back to the engineering panel, because we have a few other tasks to take care of. We will switch our essential power over to, let's say, generator 4. Move our residual volts over to bus tie, and let's turn off our bleeds. However, I want to keep my folks alive, so let's leave our air conditioning back up. My air compressors. And also some of these guys over here behind my oxygen mask. There, and there. Okay, I think we are basically ready to go. So just to recap, I am on nav for my CIVA INS. I am not really facing the right direction, but I will be shortly, and that is also set to INS so I can navigate properly. How about we fly to Boston? So we're going to start our taxi. I chose 09er left because I am very lazy. So I'm just going to head over to this taxiway, go to the next turnoff, take a left, then a right, then a left, then a left. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm not a 1960s aircraft pilot, and I am basically one of the, till we get an FS2 crew for the Captain Sim planes, I'm basically going to be doing the job of 3 or 4 people at this point. Captain, flight engineer, navigator, and sort of co-pilot dude as well. So, I am undoubtedly going to make some errors. Also, I'm not terribly great at taxiing, so forgive me for that as well. So please bear with me. I love the old vintage craft because as much as I love my NGX, I think it's a wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous, perfectly put together plane. Anything that you can set and then go to sleep and come back and land isn't quite as much of an interactive experience. What I love about these is that you need to constantly be on top of them. Okay. So we're going to stop here at the entry to 09er left. Brake, put on the parking brakes for right now. Probably don't need to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's put on some lights. And I'm going to do a bit of a D-rated takeoff. In fact, this entire flight might be a little bit longer than it really needs to be, because I do not want to, in the midst of all of my screwing around, go flying past the 250 knot limit. So we're not going to fully goose the engines, enough to get us off the ground safely on this pretty long runway 09er left. Okay. So flaps, landing lights on. We're on something that looks like a runway. We have clearance because there's nobody else around. There we go. All right. It always amazes me just how slowly the 707 accelerates. When you jam the engines on for takeoff in the NGX, it just looks like the whole thing just flies. This one, definitely a little bit slower. I'm gonna do V1 around 135 or so. V2 short, VR slowly after. Raise up the nose, don't drag the ass. And we have it. Okay. Rise up to at about, right, let's make sure the gear is going up. Then get about a 3,000 foot per minute climb. Right now I'm still just hand flying it. Still we get past 200 where I will raise the flaps. All right. Flaps go up. And I'm going to turn to meet, looks like with those flaps up, boy, this bird really does accelerate quickly. Give it a little bit more height. Lower the engines a little bit. Try to keep it around 240. Okay. Looks like we are pretty well established in the air without our speed going too crazy. I go to my autopilot, I'm going to turn it on, and we are going to put that on nav, not low VOR. We're going to put that right on nav, which means we should be able to capture the INS pretty easily. Note that the old 707 autopilot goes on the control wheel steering. If you're used to the some of the later 737s, you'll see CWS, control wheel steering. Just means it's going to hold wherever you are. I'm at about 10% pitch right now. It's going to maintain that. I can also use my pitch indicator to change exactly how much we are pointing. One thing we don't notice right now is how far we are from this VOR that I dialed in. Even if we're navigating by the CIVA INS, like I said, I like to navigate by way of the VORs. Well, I'm going to go down to my VORs and change the DMEs to normal. So we're about 31 miles. Let me check that versus the CIVA. There we have it. 31. 6.7 minutes away, 30 miles. That's what each of the two indicators mean. And we're using the left of these INSs. See, while I was talking, I went way past the 250 barrier. That's the thing about the 707, you have to constantly babysit. Okay, so I'm going to lower that a good deal. Probably about 90% power. I'm also going to lower the nose a little bit, bring up a little bit more throttle. But yeah, you can easily track exactly where you're going to be on the CIVA INS, just on the distance in time. Alright, let's get our speed back up. Give it a little bit more welly. Now, if you do want to cheat using the little Captain Sim built-in tool, I did load up this flight plan. That is RBV and DPK, and then ORW and PVD, flying right over Providence. There's 10,000. Let me just kill my lights, and then we will continue that train of thought. Or will we? Anyway, yeah, so we have about 25 miles to go until we get to our first VOR. And the CIVA INS will take us right through there, just using our navigation, seeing how close we're going to be. Going to lower the nose to about, come on, get down there. Lower it to about, 2,000, get up to our desired airspeed. Now, I was reading somewhere on the internet a couple days ago that back in the 1960s, when they were flying the beautiful birds like the 707, very different from what we were facing today, is they would actually pretty much operate very close, right up against the maximum operating speeds. Far cry from what we're talking about today. Maybe when you're flying the NGX or one of those other newer planes, you put in a cost index of 100. Even that isn't really bumping up against the very top. So to think of running this right up against the limit, because that was the most fuel efficient back when fuel didn't really cost anything, is a far cry from where we are today. Alright, I'm going to try to settle into about 325 knots. Why don't we try to push that at about 3,000 feet per minute. We're going to go up to flight level 270. A little bit more speed. Okay. One thing you'll really notice about the Captain Sim plane is that the engines are going to take a whole lot longer to react to your input. Obviously, when you're on a prop plane, if you jam it forward, it's going to respond basically instantly, but something like this, it's definitely going to be a whole lot harder. Alright, I'm just going to put on full power. I'm not paying for the fuel. It's totally fine. Okay. So now we seem pretty well established. I'm pretty close to my VOR. Not right on it, but if we use our little Captain Sim cheat, that looks like we're right on the line of where we need to be. So it looks like our navigation is going pretty darn well. One thing you will notice, especially if you've flown the 737 or the 727 with Captain Sim, is that as I look around here, there's absolutely no altitude warning whatsoever. You can't dial in that you're looking for 270 and have it yell at you. Everything has to do a good reminder. Some of the other videos I've recorded and streamed on Twitch have me just flying right past my desired goal. So I'm going to do my very best to hit 270 on the dot in just a few short minutes. Also, because we are about 6 miles away, I'm going to close down some of these other windows. Let's take a look at our CIVA INS. We are now 0.7 minutes away, about 4 miles. And I want you to take a look at the waypoint 01 right in the center of that unit. Right as we hit 0, maybe about 1 mile away, it's going to kick over from 1 to, meaning we're now going from waypoint 1 to 2. I described it as a very early version of the FMS, or FMC, whatever you want to call it, and it very much is that way. We're going to hit one waypoint. It's not like when you do VORs. See that the VOR down a little bit below. Yeah, now we're not connected because we're right over it. And the CIVA INS automatically switched from 1 to 2. So now we have 64 miles, just a little bit under 10 minutes, until we get to our next VOR, which is DPK 117.7. I'm also going to load ORW at 110. Alright, so that's course 6-9. And let's change our nav 1 to 117.7. Whoops. So nav dials certainly do get finicky. Let's also change nav 2 to 110.0. Which we're not quite picking up, just a little too far away for 110. Oh, looks like we might have just gotten it with our DME counter. Perhaps, maybe. Nope, never mind, that's just reading what is going on for my nav 1. Ah, well. It'll be a little bit of time until we get that, but for right now, we appear to be right on the 69 radial, 58 miles, until we get to our next VOR. So while we are in our steady climb, this is my first real video I'm uploading to YouTube, so I want to hear from you. Try to fly a whole bunch of vintage aircraft. Seems like there isn't a whole lot of that, at least in terms of series on the web. So, you know, what do you want to see? It looks like we're actually approaching 260, or past 260. Let me lower this down to about, I may have overdone it a little bit, but about 500 feet per minute. Then we'll put on the altitude hold. I'll get back to my previous thought in just a moment. But yeah, speed is going to climb a little bit, and at about 26950, I'm going to hit the altitude hold. Otherwise, you may find that you're going to actually go 271. There we go, altitude hold. That should let us right at 270. I think there's a plus or minus 50 in terms of what altitude is actually going to be held. So this should settle us in right at 270. See, we're a little bit over now. We should descend a little bit. Make sure I watch my speed so I don't go flying too quickly. Try to settle that around 325. Anyway, I'm thinking of doing a Pan Am trip around the world in the 707. Not probably going to be a narrated video because, you know, how much can you really just look at blank open ocean over the transatlantic? But I think a Pan Am flight number 2 around the world would be awesome. Also thinking of taking flights in the 727 and 737, the other wonderful Captain Sim jets. Also, the Just Flight Constellation is another lovely plane. One of the prettiest, sort of dolphin-shaped planes, I guess you would call it. Old school, also Pan Am. And then one of my personal favorites, the not-so-pretty but really awesome-looking Boeing 377 Stratocruiser. A2A's absolutely lovely version of that aircraft. Truly wonderful, one of the best-looking planes. So let me know in the comments. Check out one of my streams if you have any ideas, any things that you would like to see, and subscribe, and I will try to upload as much as I can. Okay, so we are now about 37 miles away from DPK, about halfway over to this VOR. When we get a little bit closer, maybe when I pick up the ORW, so right after we pass DPK, I am going to switch over to the BOS radial, or the BOS VOR. I'm going to say that because the wind is coming in at 360, 14 knots, I am going to probably try to go for 04 right at my home airport of Boston. So I'm going to dial in the Boston VOR, put in the 36 radial. It's not quite dead aligned with 04 right, but it'll give you a good indication of DME about how far away we are from Boston in general. So we will see that on my nav 2 on the co-pilot side. Also, something I should have mentioned earlier is that I believe I never actually did this, but for the hydraulic system, you want to make sure all of these are on. Forgot this, and you also want to make sure that barely see it, I think it's the aux 1 and 2 brake. Also helps to make sure that is on the right-hand side. Definitely heard some people having some issues if that isn't set. Okay. While we're here, why don't I take a look at the outside of our Captain Sim Astrojet as it flies around. Going to lower the audio a little bit because, boy, it does get loud. So we have our American Airlines Astrojet. And let's really look and dive into, zoom in, what this looks like. It's absolutely gorgeous. One of my absolute favorite liveries on one of my favorite planes, and Captain Sim has really just knocked it out of the park. Let's just zoom in Just look at the stains on some of the valve openings. Look at how the reflective aluminum. You can even see inside to the cabin how well that does. How well you can take a look at that. Just really beautiful. I also fly the Astrojet. Also fly the Astrojet for the NGX. McFat did an absolutely incredible version of that. And for the Quality Wing 757. At some point, maybe I'll describe my thoughts of the Quality Wing 757. You know, whatever. Anyway, the Astrojet, just really beautiful. I do like the new American Airlines piano key type livery. Maybe not quite. It looks like I'm going a little over speed. Lower that down a little bit. Do love the new American Airlines piano keys type livery, and I love the old Helvetica 70s type, but really glad they have a couple of the Astrojets on the 757, and I believe at least one of the 738s. Any of those special retro liveries just look really lovely. A little bit more about me in the real world. I do a fair bit of business travel, mostly on U.S. Airways, so I really also love the Piedmont and the Allegheny and the America West and all those other old school nods to the past of all of these airlines. I'm a really big fan of those. Also, we'll probably, for some of our future streams, do some of the Piedmont routes. Seems like such a great old airlines with their mix of 722s and the 732s as well. Based out of Winston-Salem and Charlotte. Alright, let's take a look at the switch over on the CIVA INS. Should be switching from 2 to 3 in just about 30 seconds. Because the VOR is going to be lost in just a little bit. Alright, yeah, this is one of the annoyances that I definitely find with running these old steam planes inside of FSX, is simply that some of the VORs just seem to get lost. We're only 75 nautical miles away, and I'm sure some of the VORs are a little bit weaker in real life, but I don't know, seems like we should be able to grab that without too much difficulty, and yet still not getting anything for 110. Probably be another 5 or 10 miles until we get that. That's on the 65 radial. Okay, so that's all dialed in. Also, we're now on 2 and 3. Heading to waypoint number 3. And let's check our flight plan at the... Let's see exactly where we are. At 117.7, we are currently 144 nautical miles away from our eventual goal. What I'm going to do now is, instead of leaving this as 110.0, I believe that the Boston VOR is pretty strong. So I'm going to dial in the main Boston VOR. Yep, we are now 134 miles, nautical miles away. And I'm going to dial in the 36 radial. I know it's a little bit premature, but we're going to put that in for runway 04 right. That'll be a nice DME measurement of how far we are away from... Great. How far we are away from our eventual location. Boy, I am having a real tough time in just isolating the speed I want for this. The 4 engines, it can really take off quickly. Hopefully I will get something right around 325 to 330 without it kicking up a little bit higher. So speaking of our American Airlines, like I said, I fly on US Air most of the time, but since that's no longer really an airline, I have a flight up to Canada this coming Sunday, going to business for just 3 short days, so I'm flying American Airlines from Boston to O'Hare, my least favorite airport on Earth. Ugh, I get delayed for at least an hour or two every single visit I take there. Everything is overpriced and it's just not a very pleasant place to be. Anyway, taking the 738 on American over there. And then actually flying WestJet codeshare on a 737-700 up to my eventual location up in Calgary. So, yeah, that's going to be an experience. US Airways, when you do hit status, treats you very, very nicely. So, wondering how American is going to be. Haven't flown that since, gosh, I think April of 2001. So it's been an awfully long time. So I'm sure I will give my thoughts on my American experience in some sort of a future stream. Well, now I want to talk about one of the other little quirks about the CIVA INS. I'm going to load this guy up, and I'm going to switch over to my rightmost 64. This isn't good. What this means is the right number is 4. We want to have an API, meaning a fidelity level, basically, of at least 4. We're at 6, which, as all of you math majors know, is above 4. So that's not going so great. Now, I've only been using the CIVA INS for 3 days now. Only been flying the 707 for about 3 days as well. So one of the things that still eludes me is updating the INS. Now, theoretically, what you can do is by turning the knob over to waypoint, you can take the GPS coordinates of, I should say latitude and longitude coordinates, but whatever, the coordinates. Press right-click on 7 and 9, enter whatever those GPS coordinates are, then right-click 3 and then right-click 9, and then put in the altitude, whatever that VOR is. Now, theoretically, that's supposed to then take this from 6 and start to realign it. Haven't really been able to get it to work so hot yet. Maybe that's something I'll try in a future video, but well, let's just see where we really are. Our current position says that we're at 4107, right now 4108, and yeah, we're kind of misaligned right now. We're off by about 0.3 on my latitude, and my longitude is actually going pretty fine. 72419. Or 723, then 2, that's much closer. So we're off a little bit here. For short flights, I haven't really noticed too big of an issue. Hopefully you won't as well. You can see it's increasing to 7, so I haven't really been updating. Really what I find is that when I pass PVD, the Providence VOR, and actually I'm going to start my descent pretty shortly, because we're at 100 miles out and we're at 27,000 feet. I don't want to have too extreme of a decrease, or of a drop, so maybe in about 5 miles I'll start my descent. You know, when we pass PVD, I'm going to really dial in the 112.0, wait for the 110.3, which is my ILS frequency, to get in, and then just use my navigation from there. Give that a shot. Okay, so we're at 98. Oh, I don't want this to be too unpleasant. I'm going to turn off my altitude hold. Dial back my throttles to about half, and let's put this in about a 2,500 feet per minute descent. My flight plan is showing that I should be over PVD at about 17,000, but I think that's a bit extreme. I want to be probably closer to about 14,000 at that point. I want to have plenty of time to slow this bird down when we get to about 10,000 feet. Alright, let me actually lower that to about 3,000. Change my throttle so we're not going to go over about 330 knots. You can see that using our little cheat, yeah, we're a little bit off, a little bit to the left of our radial right now. Generally, I think that's pretty okay. Certainly nothing really to get worried about. And actually, now that I think about it, because we're heading to 110.0, I should update this. We're actually... Oh no, we are on the correct 65 radial. So we're a little bit to the north. Not a huge deal for what we need to do. Alright, so we're going to keep that about 3,000 feet per minute. So yeah, let's take a look at this Captain Sim aircraft. Now I know that a lot of the Captain Sims, or at least the 777 in particular, tend to get a bit of a bad rap, but I have really not quite understood why it gets that really bad rap. I've always found them to be really nice. I mean, sure, the frame rates can be tricky. I'm on a laptop, about a year-old laptop, but it's an i7 with a GTX 675MX something, I don't know. Maybe not, can't quite remember. Card, so, you know, it does pretty well. I could play Far Cry 3 without too much difficulty, and it's able to get through. Let's see what we're getting now. Yeah, we're getting anywhere from 30 to 45 frames instantaneously. So frame rates are passable. Now, I don't have traffic on, and I don't have my scenery settings quite maxed, but doing pretty okay. But, you know, the effort and the work that goes into just making the cockpit look great, I think, is lovely. I mean, just look at the scrapes and scratches and the textures on the throttle quadrant. Just look, it looks absolutely lovely. So I've always been a big fan of Captain Sim. Going to use a lot of the 707 and 727 and 737 in some of the future streams. Just really think they do a good job. Now you may be wondering then, well, why haven't I been using this guy? This built-in virtual cockpit CIVA INS? Well, the reason is, it doesn't do anything. I can turn this as much as I want. You see, I'm actually clicking, and it's rotating, but nothing's really happening. The reason is, to the best of my understanding, is Captain Sim tried to contact the makers of the CIVA INS unit and said, hey, boy, it would be fantastic if we could get this sort of the background code to make sure this is working for the VC. They didn't really hear back. That's why we have to do everything with these still functional but not entirely beautiful units that we have in front of us. Okay, we're 6 miles away from our ORW, meaning we're going to turn pretty much due east to get to Providence. Then from there, we're just going to... There we go. Now we're getting a full signal on our Boston radial. So we're really going to use that as our main navigation until we hit our runway 4 right entry. See, we're passing through, just passed through flight level 160 as we begin our, or continue our descent. Let's toss in our next VOR to track 115.6. Oops, 115.6, and this is going to be at 83. Which we're dead on. Way to go, plane. So yeah, I think we're going to, I'll have to really lessen the descent as we get below 10,000. We definitely descended a little bit early for what we need, but I'm still a little new to this 707. Try not to overdo it. Want to make sure I have plenty of time to catch any errors that I may make. So another reason why I'm a huge fan of Captain Sim is every December, I think in August as well, now that I think about it. This being August, that means that that's especially useful. They tend to have a big, huge sale where they put most of their aircraft up for, what is it, €10, I think? So $14, £8, something like that. All of their planes cost that each. So I definitely loaded up last year. Picked up all of the old steam-powered airplanes. Highly recommended. Because, sure, I mean, you know, the Captain Sim 777, the PMDG 777 is the gold standard for everything at this point. I don't quite have it yet. Maybe I'll put up a donate link if y'all want to see me fly in the 777. But, you know, I don't have it quite yet. But, and it's the gold standard. It's undoubtedly the best plane that's currently available. But, you know, at $90 for the base and then another $30, you have to really, really like the 777 and need that perfect type of plane for it to really make financial sense for you. Whereas if you get the Captain Sim for $14 on sale or even $50 or whatever it is normally, and that's a pretty good deal. I've definitely done an around-the-world flight on the CS 777, and other than the Greece airport, completely not picking up any sort of ILS, I can't say I had too much in the way of any issues with it. You can see right now I'm just bringing up the trim, try to get our, actually going to kill the throttle as well for right now as we try to get below 250 knots as we cross through 10,000. Also take this time to put on my landing lights. We should be going over Providence very, very shortly. For those of you unfamiliar with New England geography, it's pretty much due south. That's why we turned east. Then we're going to turn a little bit to the left, really to the north, as we try to intercept our KBOS VOR. So about 12 miles to go for that. For right now, I may as well get ahead of it. I'm going to dial in the Boston VOR 112.7. I'm also going to start by dialing in the ILS into nav2 just so I can see when that does in fact get picked up. Okay, so we are below 235. I'm going to lower it down a little bit. Let's descend at about 1,000 feet per minute. Going to settle in at about 2,500 or 2,600 feet. Wait for the VOR for Boston to really kick in. It looks like we are just, first off, let me put that on 36. And let's make sure we will wait until we actually cross Providence. At which point I will actually turn the heading bug to start to intercept that VOR, at least until our nav2 shows that we are in ILS range. Now you may notice that if you see my heading bug, I'm turning it around and absolutely nothing is happening. I just keep spinning, the heading bug doesn't change. Well, here's why. For reasons that I'm sure are important, can't really figure them out myself, it looks like the CIVA INS may actually just control the heading bug. So when you have it in nav mode on the autopilot, you cannot change the heading bug at all. So I'm going to turn it about 45 degrees, more or less from here, maybe about 30 degrees, right about at 060, until I can intercept that VOR. We'll be crossing Providence in about 4 miles. I'm actually going to turn over to heading right now, because it's time to start doing this manually. 2. He waits. I really thought that would come up to 1 a whole lot quicker. Alright, see how that automatically switched, saying that we have about 43 miles to go to Boston, but right now we are on heading mode. Round of applause for the CIVA INS. You have done your job wonderfully today, buddy. Okay, you know what? We are way early, so I'm going to bring this pitch up a little bit, because we are going to hit 2,500 pretty shortly. Now, as I mentioned, I'm in the southern part, or I've mentioned I'm in the Boston area. I'm in the southern part of Boston. It's pretty cool. Whenever we have a northerly wind, I'm close enough that I can actually see the planes on approach to Boston right outside of my window. It's on American, I think 738, come by a little bit ago. Maybe I'm the only person who finds that interesting, but hey, it keeps me entertained when I'm bored. So we are getting close, still nothing on the nav2, so we're not quite in line. But I'm going to bring this in a little closer as we get closer to intercepting that VOR. Also going to bring up my throttles a little bit because, well, I need to pitch down because that turn has actually leveled me out entirely. Like I said earlier, you are certainly in charge of a whole bunch of different things. You can't stop paying attention for a moment. Okay, lower the throttle back down so I don't go over 250 knots. Alright. 37 more nautical miles to go. We should be picking up any moment now. Let me make sure I do have it in as 110.3. Indeed I do. Now, this is going to get a little bit finicky. I've noticed it more on 04 right, because I tend to land here fairly often. You're going to see when I do switch over to the ILS, at least I think you will, is it's going to show that we're way far to the west. Then, all of a sudden, it's going to show that we are way far to the east. Not really sure why, but this tends to get a little finicky when approaching this ILS. Maybe it just isn't that clear when you're that far away. Passing through 6,000 at about 33 miles to go. Let's do our little Captain Sim cheat. Yeah, it looks like we're a little east of that line itself, but that's okay. Oops, zooming the wrong way. In fact, with that, why don't we bring it in a little bit? Okay. You can see we're close on approach to Boston, right in the bay. And since we're basically heading right for it, I'm going to switch over. Let me make this one 112.3. And I'm whoa! Let's try that again. 112.7 first off. 110.3. Still not quite on that ILS. Certainly getting a little close. Hopefully that will kick in shortly. Alright, there we have it, and at least until it updates, it looks like we are dead on. At least I think we are. Let's zoom in. Yeah, looks like we are dead on. Well, that couldn't have gone much better. We'll see if it updates and freaks out and shows that I'm not, in fact, dead on. But with that, I'm going to switch my AP up to... Yeah, it looks like it's dragging a little bit to the right now. That's fine. I'm going to bring that back over. Yep, see, that's what happens. And that's so... I haven't really figured out why that happens, but you saw that the VOR kicked kind of quickly, showing that we went from right on it to right not on it. So, we're going to slalom back over here a good deal. Right now I'm switching back to heading mode. Heading back over to the west so that we may intercept this. Of course, because we descended a little early, I have ample time to figure out all of these shenanigans. Probably a pretty good idea when you are flying these old manual aircraft. Alright, we're heading almost due north at this point. That should track it in. Excellent. Bringing it in closer. Then we're going to turn on the VOR. We are approaching... See, we still don't have any sort of glide slope indicator, but we are going through flight level 40 at this point. Pitch the nose down a little bit just so we can get to 2,500. Alright. Now bring the heading over and let's turn on VOR. Now, a big note that certainly caused some issues in some of my Twitch streams a few days ago is the 707 behaves like the 727, if you're familiar with that, in terms of how the glide slope interacts with the altitude hold. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, here's what I mean. When I hit 2,500, I'm going to put on the altitude hold just so I can automate that until we really start our proper descent. The problem is that if you have altitude hold on when you hit the glide slope, it's going to stay at 2,500 or whatever height you have. It's not like in, say, the 737 where the altitude hold is going to get turned off. It's, when you hit the glide slope, it's going to stay there, so it kind of assumes the human knows what's best, even if it should probably know better than to do that. So when I hit a little bit closer to the glide slope, we are going to make sure we turn off that altitude hold. Probably don't need this guide about where we are at this point, so... Alright. So I live over here-ish. Not quite that far, but southern part. Alright, I'm also going to lower my throttle setting a little bit, try to sneak in at about 210 knots. I will freely admit that I'm going to approach this a whole lot slower than they probably did in real life. Simply because, again, it's only my 4th or 5th flight in the 707, I don't want to blow it. Okay, so I have put that on at about 2510. We're going to see where the altitude hold is going to take us. I don't know if it's going to leave us on 2500 or if it's going to take us up to 2600. Either should be fine for this approach, but let's see what it's going to do. For right now, I'm going to put on the glide slope. Once I am settled on whatever altitude this ends up choosing, then I will turn off that altitude hold so it doesn't cause us issues on our final approach. Note that, at least as far as I've been able to see, there is no auto brake either. Nor is there really arming of your speed brakes, so yeah, this is really very much old school. I will, however, hit my first bit of flaps. See, we're on 14 right now. As we descend to 180 knots, going to put up a whole bunch of throttle, and right there we just hit the glides. Nope, not quite on the glide slope, but we're getting pretty close. And on the glide slope, pretty close. You can see our little horizontal line is lowering at about 170 knots and 10 miles out. Hit a little more throttle, hit our gear, and we seems to be all systems go for our final approach. Now, like I said, I do a fair bit of traveling, and one thing I love about my Boston approach, not that I get to fly into this runway 04 right all that often, it really tends to take us over the ocean more often than not because of the westerly wind. But, you know, you get such close access to Logan. It's just right in East Boston, right over the harbor. Absolutely lovely. So many other places are a 30 or 40 mile trip outside to get to the airport. You definitely don't have to deal with that in Boston. Final hit of flaps. We're going to lower this down to a VREF of about 140. This is, of course, way more developed than Flight Simulator will make it appear. There's our outer marker. Quite a beautiful approach as you come into Boston, especially during dusk. All right, we are dead ahead for 04 right, descending to our decision height. Obviously no fog or weather in the way. By the way, I'm going to zoom in on something over here. That building over there, a set of buildings, is actually, this isn't going to sound terribly exciting, that is Deer Island, which is a wastewater treatment plant. You may be wondering why I'm talking to you about the wastewater treatment plants of Boston. It is because, we are way below our glide slope right now. Not really sure why. Some reason that just turned off. Not really sure why. Anyway, that area is called Deer Island. Manually flying this home now. Is called Deer Island, which is a great place not only to get an unparalleled view of Boston, but also when there is a wind from the east, the planes fly right overhead, which looks really, really awesome. So if you are a Bostonian, great. If not, if you are visiting and you want a nice panoramic view of the city, go to the wastewater treatment plant. Well, yeah, that glide slope certainly did not track the way I was hoping to, so I have to increase my throttle, try to get back up to where we need to be. We are flying basically right over, if you're ever taking a cruise out of Boston, you're flying right over, I believe it's called Black Falcon, where all of the Norwegian cruise lines take you either up to Canada or down to, this is going to be a terrible approach, my apologies folks, not sure why that got so funky. Anyway, I'm going to bring this in now, lower my throttle. Anyway, if you are taking a cruise out of Boston, they will leave right underneath us. There we go, looks like we're still pretty much on something akin to a center line. A little bit shallow, but let's kill my throttle, do a little bit of a flare. There's hitting the ground. Put put on the reversers, and hit my auto brakes. Luckily, all of our runways here are quite long, so it takes a good deal of time for the CS planes to slow down. Oddly, one of the really strange things is... Cool. One of the really strange things is that once you do get it slowed down, which takes a while, it's actually really, really hard to get moving again. Well, I hope you did enjoy this flight. I am going to continue my taxi, but I will call an end to this video. If you have any comments, please do let me know in the, comments area. Let me know any ideas you have for future flights, and please remember to subscribe. There will be plenty of more vintage flights upcoming. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye, folks.